Hi, I'm Cassandra, and you are tuned into Zero Waste Central, where we talk to people who are instrumental in bringing Central Vermonters and Vermonters in general toward zero waste. Today, I have with me Kathy Jamison. She is the Solid Waste Program Manager at the Department of Environmental Conservation, and she's here to tell us about some of the initiatives at the Department of Environmental Conservation that will bring our community closer to zero waste. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today.
Good. I'm glad to have you here. Thanks. Could you tell us a little bit about your job and what are some of the initiatives that are moving Vermont toward being a zero waste community?
Sure. I am the Solid Waste Program Manager, as you said, at DEC. And we have both what we call a regulatory side of the program, where we have the oversight of facilities that manage these materials, as well as of the planning and the recycling and reduction programs that we are using to try to advance our initiatives. And with respect to zero waste, we take the approach of calling it sustainable materials management. Many of the things that people are throwing away have value, and so we're calling these materials rather than waste. And I sometimes slip and still use the waste, the W word, but we really want to emphasize the value of these materials. And we want to promote the use of these materials more sustainably. And there's a lot of reasons why. Not only are these valuable resources that have a finite nature to them, but when we manage these materials more sustainably, we're reducing the amount of energy that is consumed, we're reducing the greenhouse gases that are emitted, and having a much less environmental footprint. So there's a lot of benefits when we use these materials sustainably and work towards zero waste.
I love, first of all, that you call it the W word, and I also love that that a state department is dedicated to reclaiming what we formerly called waste as resources. Or I think in our agency we call it resources, but it's the same idea, materials.
Right.
So tell me about, first of all, can you just describe when you say, can you repeat the phrase you're using?
Sustainable materials management.
Sustainable materials management, no longer waste management.
Great.
And so what do you mean when you say sustainable materials?
Well, what we're trying to do is recognize the inherent value of these items, and we want to promote the use of these materials. So rather than looking from what used to be called cradle to grave, when you would were done with something, you would just toss it aside, is that it is more of a cradle to cradle. What happens to that item when the consumer is done using it? There should be a use for that item. Is it reused? Is it broken down and recycled into the parts and then made into other items? So what happens to that item? And so there are some initiatives that we are using to try to promote that. And one of the exciting ones I would like to share is our eCycles program.
eCycles, and I assume the E is for electronics?
Correct.
Okay.
So the legislature passed a law a couple of years ago that helped us establish this program. And it is for the collection of computers, monitors, printers, peripherals to computers, and televisions. And people who, Vermonters, can use this program at no additional charge for free and can bring those devices in that need to be recycled. And who can use that? It's our homeowners, small businesses that employ less than 10 employees, charities, and school districts. And they can bring it to any of our convenient locations. We have over 90 locations throughout the state. And you can go to our website to find the location nearest you.
Can you just, sorry to interrupt you, can you say the website name?
Sure. It's the easiest way to find it is to go to vtecycles.org, or you could Google VT eCycles and find it that way.
Okay.
The reason why we can offer this program at no additional charge is that it is fully paid for by the manufacturers.
Really?
And that is a program that we call extended producer responsibility.
Yeah.
So the producer of these materials, the manufacturers, get a benefit when they sell these materials to us. But when we're done with it, they still have a responsibility for trying to best manage the materials when the consumer is done. So they are paying for the collection, transportation, and recycling of these devices. And the reason why we don't want these devices thrown away is not only are they a resource, but there can be toxic materials used in the manufacturing of these materials. There's also precious metals used that should be removed and recycled and used in manufacturing additional items, rather than being tossed into our landfill and just sitting in a hole in the ground.
Right, taking up space and causing hazardous leachate and
Potentially.
all that. But so I just want to get into a little bit more detail about, say I take my computer monitor or old laptop that's not running anymore, and where does it go? I mean, I'll take it to a site, you'll take it for free, the manufacturer is then recycling. Is there like a stop where the precious metals get mined out and then the plastics get recycled, or what happens to it?
Sure, let me explain a little bit. So DEC is not manning all of these collection locations. They are located in the town nearest you. There could be a couple in your town. And sometimes it's the recycling facility that you're used to bringing your other recyclables to. Sometimes it's a transfer station that you sometimes bring your drop off your trash. And these collection locations get picked up, the e-waste that's brought to those locations get picked up periodically and transported to our recycler under contract, which is Good Point Recycling.
Right.
And they're located in Middlebury, Vermont. And they basically either reuse or recycle all of these materials. A lot of the material gets taken down into the subcomponents, and then they can sell those subcomponents for reuse or remanufacturing. It's an interesting place to take a tour. They will have Gaylords, large containers of just like, for instance, screws from unscrewing all the computers. And you wouldn't think that they would accumulate to much volume, but they all add up. All of these materials add up. It's amazing.
And just for a visual for people who don't know what a Gaylord is, isn't that one of those like washing machine sized boxes?
That's a really good description, right.
Right, so one of those filled with screws from computers, and that's just one component that gets mined out of them.
Right,
or,
I mean,
or
the whole thing gets taken apart down to the
right.
subcomponents and can get recycled.
Yeah, that does sound like an interesting tour. So, first of all, I love that the manufacturer is funding this, and it makes a lot of sense. Do they actually ever take back parts that they reuse in the manufacturing process?
Well, the manufacturers pay DEC directly so that we can then pay the contractor.
I see.
And then the contractor sells the recycled materials. We, while we have procedures in place for how the material is managed so that it's environmentally safely managed, we don't track economically where it's being managed. The good news about this program is that after our first year, which ended in July, Vermonters brought in 4.5 million pounds of e-waste in 1 year in Vermont.
Give me a visual of what 4.5 million pounds looks like.
Boy, that's a
have
tough one. No, I don't have that one.
Piles,
but
mountains.
But to give you, I mean, Vermonters really did a great job in doing the right thing and bringing the material in to be recycled. That's more than any other state that has an e-cycles program, and about half the states did in any 1 year per capita.
Per capita, yeah. So, and I just want to take a moment to just mention that I actually am an employee at the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District, and I believe all the solid waste management districts, is that correct, are part of your program by providing collection sites for the e-cycling.
The districts, and then also many other towns in Vermont that may not be part of districts are also participating, and that's how we have over 90 locations throughout the state that are available to Vermonters throughout the year. And that was the real key in the legislation for this program, is that the legislators really wanted to have a consistent service that was available to all Vermonters, regardless of what kind of district they lived in, a solid waste district that they lived in. And you know, the good news is we had a banner first year, and we're on track for having a very successful second year. And so that's a lot of material that could have been destined to landfill, but is not, and is being more sustainably managed. So we're working towards zero waste.
I would imagine 4.5 million pounds of e-waste in a landfill would be like an entire cell of a landfill.
We talk about tons when we talk about landfills, so it's not quite that volume. But it is a significant volume. And not that we were landfilling all electronics before,
Right.
because before this legislation was passed, we were collecting about 1.6 million pounds, but
Right.
we nearly tripled the amount
Yes.
that was being collected in one
Right.
year.
So, and just for people in central Vermont, you can go to our website at www.cvswmd.org, and we will have our 2013 collection schedule up for central Vermont. But there are also some year-round collection sites in central Vermont, is that correct?
Yes, there are. Off the top of my head, I think those are located at the Wilson Park Recycling Depot in Barrytown, at Computer Barn on the Barry Montpelier Road, and at the Casella Drop-Off Station in Montpelier.
On Route 2?
Route 2, right.
Okay, yeah. So is there anything else about the eCycles program that people might want to know?
Well, if they would like to know anything, please visit our website at vtecycles.org, or you can call our toll-free number at 1-855-6-eCycles.
Right, and that's computer monitors, TVs, computers, hard drive, peripherals, meaning what, mice and
Right, anything that
external
plugs
hard
into a
drives?
computer.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That's
Yes.
a huge volume.
Yeah, what was interesting in the sorts that we did of the material coming in is that 80 to 85% by weight are monitors and TVs. Yeah.
Now, are you getting a lot of the old stuff that is no longer like the big, huge TVs and the?
We are, but it's
Yeah.
amazing when you look at other states that have had programs longer, the weight usually doesn't taper off. You know, one would think that
Right.
it
After
would,
a while.
but
Yeah.
Americans tend to want to have more and more electronics in our
Right.
lives.
Yeah, and they're don't get me started on that because it's all built into how they work. So, and I would like to just put in a plug for the Restore too, because isn't that
They
a
are
good
another.
resource?
They are another collection location.
Oh, they are?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, thank you for mentioning
Good.
that.
There's one in Burlington, but also one right in Barry.
Right, downtown Barry.
And don't they also, if they can, fix them and resell them at a very reduced rate?
I'm not sure if the Resort is doing that in Barry.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure the one in Burlington is.
Okay. But people can drop off in Barry.
Yes, absolutely, free of charge.
Good to know. Okay. So I know that's one of your big initiatives. Can you tell me what are some other initiatives?
Well, what's exciting is the new legislation that was passed in May, this past May, and it's called Act 148. And it's the most significant solid waste legislation since Act 78, 25 years ago. And the reason why it's significant, or what prompted it, is that while we have done a lot of great things over the last 3 decades in trying to make improvements in how we manage either solid waste or materials.
Let's call it materials.
Materials, absolutely. In that we've kind of stuck at this 30 to 35% recycling reuse rate, where we're diverting
Right.
about a third of the waste or materials that we generate.
Right.
We're diverting, but we're still throwing away 2/3.
Yeah.
And we've been stuck there for almost 10 years. And so
Wow.
we knew we needed to do something differently in order to make improvements. And over time, the materials, especially the recyclable materials, have become very valuable on the market. There is a real market for it. 20 years ago, the markets had to develop. Well, they are
Right.
developed now.
Yeah.
And so these are very valuable materials. So that's another significant
Right.
change that we wanted to address. And one of the reasons, or the biggest goal of Act 148, is so that we can divert more of these materials from the landfill into having more use for them.
Right.
Again, back
Yeah.
to the sustainable management.
So because I'm just trying to thinking out loud here, but because there's a larger market now, a developed market for recycled materials or recyclables, by throwing them away, it would actually be throwing out essentially raw materials for manufacturing? Is that what it comes down to?
Yes, think of it like, for instance, aluminum can. All the energy that goes into the aluminum can, it's not just the materials. Energy is becoming
Right.
incredibly valuable. And
Right.
anyone that knows that heats their house, right?
Right.
That we are
Right,
paying a lot
especially
for
now.
energy, right? And
Yeah.
so energy is as important as the raw resource itself.
Right.
So the amount of energy that is saved when an aluminum can is made from a recycled
Right.
aluminum is
Right.
96% of the energy that's needed.
Wow.
When you compare making that aluminum can from raw materials, because it takes so much energy to extract the ore, to melt it down, to get the material such that you can then produce the can, where it's such a clean material when it's recycled, it can go, back into producing more cans. So energy is really key.
So, and by energy too, I'm thinking with the whole mining process, is it accurate that, say we're diverting all of our cans and plastic and glass, then there's all this mining that won't have to happen in other parts of the world?
Ideally, if we
Right.
if we were able to keep our
Yep.
consumption at the way
Right.
it is,
Yep.
then yes, we wouldn't have to have more mining.
Right.
Unfortunately, people tend to be incredible consumers.
Yeah.
And so the one thing we have to remember is that it's important to not consume more because we feel good about recycling.
Right, that's a really good point. That's why we have those 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and then recycle.
Yes.
So let's get into Act 148 and talk about specifically what it does.
Sure. It focuses on two types of materials. The recyclables, which are the common things that you normally have in your blue bin, and also organics, such as food scraps, leaf and yard waste, clean wood. And the reason why it focused on those two types of materials is they comprise about 50% of the materials we throw away.
Wow.
So if we could target those and work really well on reducing what's thrown away of those two material types, we will make significant stride in pushing the material from the landfill side or the disposal side into the diversion side. And so what it does is it uses a combination of choices and convenience for the generators of these materials. It tries to provide incentives for moving the materials into the right direction, and also for those that may wish to invest in providing services. It sends a clear signal that these materials will be available because they will no longer be able to be thrown away. And it phases things, the bans, and the actions in over time. So there is time for us to carefully develop the services and infrastructure that will be needed to manage these materials.
So I'll just state my sort of really broad strokes understanding of the bill, and maybe you can correct or clarify.
Sure.
My understanding is that by 2020, all recyclables will be mandatory, and that would be the plastic, the glass, the tin, paper, and that compostables, meaning the food scraps and the yard waste, for businesses and individuals as well.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Well, the 2020 date is for the food scraps.
Okay.
And everybody in Vermont should be diverting food scraps by 2020.
Okay.
Now we have a phased-in approach for the organics, for the food scraps, so that the larger generators will have to divert their food scraps sooner if there is a composting facility or similar facility within a 20-mile radius. And so that's the incentive to, if they are close to a facility or if a facility gets built close to them, that the larger ones, and we define larger as at first 102 tons per year. Sounds like a weird number, but it's 2 tons a week.
Oh, okay, and that would be
104
what, like
tons, I'm
a
sorry.
hospital maybe, or a university, or what would be an example of that?
Both are right.
Right, okay.
So it's 104 tons a year
Okay,
for the first large generators, and that
Okay.
would trigger in 2014.
next year,
Yes,
basically.
Yes.
So they're
And-
online next year.
Right, and then it phases over time. 52 tons a year, 2015. Well, and it goes down so that by 2020, everybody, even regardless of the distance to a composting facility.
Right.
And what we envision is from now until 2020, more options will become available for people to use for diverting organics. An interesting aspect of 148 is that it also includes a hierarchy for how organic should be managed. And so that it's trying to put the best use forward if an option is available nearby, such as, first of all, reducing. As we talked before,
Right.
reducing actually conserves more of the
Right.
resources
Yeah, that
and
makes
energy
sense.
than anything else.
Yeah.
And we've already had a workshop for some of the larger food generators on how they can take approaches to reducing food waste.
Oh, good, great.
And then the next step would be feeding the people, what we call
Right.
feeding the people. So there's food that is sometimes not ideal. You know, the tomato example in a grocery
Right.
store. They want
Right.
just the perfect round
Right.
tomato that looks
Yep.
very appealing to the customer. They may get some tomatoes in that don't look quite perfect, but they're certainly quite edible
Right.
and nutritious. And so those foods can be diverted to feed people. Okay? And then the next category down would be to feed animals. Or use in agricultural sources, and then the next category down is composting. It's not that composting is bad; it's just that we're trying to have
Right.
the higher use
Right.
of the material before we
Right.
go down the ladder.
Well, that makes sense on every level. Just absolutely glad to hear that, actually.
The aspect on Act 148 with respect to recyclables has the ban on the materials sooner than 2020. And that's because we've been recycling for a long period of time, as you pointed out. And we have a lot of infrastructure and services already in place. So that'll come sooner in 2015.
Okay.
And then following that will be the ban on what we call leaf and yard waste or residuals. And that's material that people tend to collect in the spring and the fall. And some people already are managing that in their own backyard, so that no change for them. And other people will have the option of having those materials managed at the same time or the same location as where they take their trash. We call that parallel collection. So if you have your trash picked up on your curbside, you can have your recyclables picked up on the curbside, you can have your leaf and yard waste picked up on the curbside, and eventually your food scraps.
So somehow I thought, other than food scraps, that was already the case.
Not everybody has that service, and that's the other part of this bill, is to try to have some consistent services throughout the state.
I see. And then I was wondering, I know that University of Vermont has created a master composter program.
Actually, we fund that program.
You fund it
through the UVM Extension
Right.
program. And yes,
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That is an every other year course that parallels with the Master Gardener program
Right.
that they also offer.
Right.
And how to encourage people to do backyard composting
Right.
or maybe small-scale community
Right.
composting in their area.
That's
And that's been
wonderful.
incredibly successful.
Yeah.
Every year we have more than 100 registrants that participate in that class.
And so, won't those master composters then be available to be of assistance to people who maybe need a workshop on how to build a compost bin? So as people are getting into compliance, or if they just want to, because they want to, start backyard composting, there's actually now a team of people trained across the state. Is that right?
Ideally, that is exactly how the program is supposed to work, that at the end of the Master Composter class, there are a number of community service hours that each student is supposed to participate in. And part of that is either giving back to their area or promoting composting in some sort of area near them.
And I have to put in a plug for the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District, because that is something that we do. We haul compostable materials to one of 3 area composters, and we're actually expanding our program to help businesses get on board with Act 148 before they're actually required to. So I'm curious, are there other food scraps haulers around the state who are just only doing that?
There are a few. There's some in the Chittenden County area, private haulers. And Brattleboro is an area of the state that's just past curbside organics pickup for their residents within the town. So anyone within Brattleboro can do that. So that's pretty exciting.
And that's where they take the compost and it's out on the curb with the recycling in the trash. So simple and easy.
Right. They had a pilot in Brattleboro last year where 150 residences participated, and now they're expanding it. I do want to commend Central Vermont Solid Waste District in the organics diversion that they have in their school system. It is great.
Right.
I believe you have every school within your district now on board diverting organics, and that has twice as many benefits in that. Not only are you diverting those organics, but you're teaching this generation how to do it. So there's a lot of perks on that one.
Yeah, the school program is phenomenal. And now they're going into other zero waste aspects of diversion as well as recycling and reuse and trash audits. It's really exciting. So Kathy, thank you so much for coming and telling us about Act 148 and the e-cycles program. Can you repeat the website and contact information if people have any questions about either?
Sure. Well, for the e-cycles, it's vtecycles.org, and our toll-free number is 1-855-6-E-Cycles. Our website for our solid waste program, if you Google ANR solid waste, you should be able to find it.
ANR Solid Waste.
Yes.
Great. And I'm just going to say one more thing about the diversion, that in central Vermont, if people don't have their own backyard compost, they can bring food scraps to DJ's convenience store on River Street on Wednesdays and Saturdays, or to our ARC at 3 Williams Lane in Barrie on Mondays and Fridays. Or they can call us and find out more about how to do their own backyard composting. So thank you so much. And we'll hear more from you, I'm guessing, as this law gets enacted.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And you've been watching Zero Waste Central. Thanks for tuning in.